Russia's economy faces significant challenges as it grapples with the strain of its prolonged war in Ukraine and the impact of international sanctions. Recent reports highlight how financial pressures and sanctions are destabilizing the country's economic foundations. These sanctions have restricted access to global markets and foreign reserves, reducing financial flexibility and economic growth potential. Simultaneously, the military expenditures, which now account for an unprecedented 6% of GDP, have overheated the economy and diverted resources from other critical sectors. Despite government claims of economic resilience, cracks in Russia's economy are becoming increasingly evident. Inflation rates remain high, forcing the central bank to raise its policy rate to 21%. This monetary tightening, coupled with fiscal stimulus from war spending, has created imbalances that analysts warn could lead to a financial crisis. The depletion of sovereign reserves, projected to run out within a year, exacerbates the situation, leaving limited options to sustain the war economy without fueling inflation or further weakening the ruble. Oil exports remain a vital lifeline for the Russian economy. However, fluctuations in oil prices pose a constant risk. With global oil prices uncertain and sanctions targeting the energy sector, Russia's dependence on fossil fuel revenues makes it vulnerable to external shocks. Furthermore, the loss of European markets for energy exports has forced the Kremlin to seek alternative buyers in Asia, often at discounted rates. Sanctions targeting high-tech imports and financial institutions have stunted industrial and technological growth. Restricted access to foreign-made components has impacted industries like aviation and technology, reducing productivity and innovation. Additionally, international isolation has cut off investment opportunities, limiting Russia's long-term economic prospects. The Kremlin's narrative of economic stability relies heavily on manipulated statistics, including overestimations of GDP growth and inflation control. Independent analyses suggest a more precarious reality, where the true economic conditions are concealed under layers of state propaganda. Transparency in economic data has diminished, making reliable assessments challenging. The war economy has also amplified inequality within Russia. The enrichment of elites through defense contracts has contrasted sharply with declining real incomes for the average citizen. If military spending were to decline, as it likely would in peacetime, the absence of economic diversification could lead to widespread social unrest and dissatisfaction with the ruling regime. Firstly, thank you for watching, and don't forget to smash that like, subscribe, and notification bell for more global finance uncovered. As we continue to work hard and around the clock to always deliver and improve on our content for you, we would greatly appreciate your additional support by you clicking the like button, notification bell, and subscribe button and joining our channel's growth.
Internationally, Russia has sought to offset its isolation by deepening ties with nations in the BRICS bloc and other sympathetic states. While these partnerships provide some economic relief, they are insufficient to counterbalance the comprehensive sanctions imposed by Western nations. The recent BRICS summit in Kazan highlighted these efforts but also underscored Russia's limited global influence compared to pre-war levels. Russia's long-term economic outlook remains bleak. Analysts predict that continued isolation, combined with unsustainable fiscal and monetary policies, could lead to a deep recession. Structural reforms needed to stabilize the economy are unlikely while the war persists, leaving the country in a state of prolonged economic vulnerability. In conclusion, while the Russian government continues to portray a narrative of resilience, the underlying economic pressures are mounting. With sanctions tightening, resources depleting, and social discontent rising, Russia's economy faces a challenging and uncertain future. The full impact will likely become more apparent as the war stretches on and economic buffers are exhausted. The Russian economy is also facing a critical demographic challenge. The combination of war-related casualties, emigration of skilled workers, and declining birth rates has severely strained the labor market. These demographic shifts could limit economic productivity and innovation in the long term. Moreover, the exodus of businesses and professionals, prompted by sanctions and political uncertainty, further erodes the talent pool necessary for sustained economic growth. Another pressing issue is the diminishing role of foreign direct investment (FDI) in Russia. Historically reliant on international capital to boost its energy and manufacturing sectors, Russia now struggles to attract new investments. Many Western firms have exited the Russian market, and even companies from China and other allied nations remain cautious due to the risks associated with sanctions. This lack of investment exacerbates the technological stagnation in key industries. Russia's agricultural sector, which had been a bright spot in recent years, is also feeling the impact of the war and sanctions. The restrictions on imports of agricultural machinery and fertilizers have raised costs for domestic farmers, threatening food security and export competitiveness. These challenges coincide with logistical disruptions caused by the war, further straining the sector's ability to meet domestic and international demand.
The financial system in Russia has become increasingly fragile. Banks face rising levels of non-performing loans as businesses and individuals struggle to cope with economic pressures. While the government has implemented measures to stabilize the banking sector, such as capital injections and regulatory easing, these actions may only provide temporary relief. Long-term stability requires broader economic recovery, which remains elusive under current conditions. The energy sector, while still a significant source of revenue, is undergoing structural changes that could weaken Russia's economic dominance. Western sanctions on advanced oil and gas technologies limit Russia's ability to develop new energy fields. Additionally, Europe's pivot toward alternative energy sources has significantly reduced its dependence on Russian fossil fuels, forcing Moscow to compete in less profitable markets. Social tensions in Russia are rising as economic hardships deepen. The general population faces declining purchasing power, reduced access to goods and services, and growing unemployment. While the government has increased propaganda to maintain public support for the war, there are signs of dissatisfaction and unrest among specific groups, particularly in regions bearing the brunt of military recruitment and casualties. Another factor complicating Russia's economic future is the growing cost of maintaining occupied territories in Ukraine. The expenses related to infrastructure rebuilding, administrative control, and military oversight in these areas place an additional burden on an already strained budget. This spending diverts resources away from essential domestic priorities, further undermining the country's economic stability. Lastly, Russia's isolation from the global financial system limits its ability to adapt to economic shocks. The reduced access to international payment systems, coupled with the freezing of foreign assets, has forced Russia to develop alternative mechanisms for trade and finance. While these efforts provide some relief, they are not enough to offset the broader economic losses caused by sanctions and geopolitical isolation. The worsening economic situation in Russia has led to a notable shift in public spending priorities. The government is increasingly allocating resources toward military and security expenditures while cutting back on social programs and infrastructure investments. This reallocation further undermines domestic quality of life and could exacerbate public dissatisfaction in the long term. Coupled with rising inflation and reduced social safety nets, these measures create an environment ripe for socioeconomic instability. Russia's currency, the ruble, has faced significant depreciation, partly due to declining oil revenues and capital outflows. While the Central Bank of Russia has intervened to stabilize the currency, these efforts have come at the cost of depleting foreign currency reserves. Additionally, the ruble's weakened purchasing power has driven up import costs, contributing to inflation and making it harder for Russian businesses to remain competitive globally. As sanctions deepen and economic challenges mount, the Russian government is increasingly reliant on alternative trading alliances and informal economies. Partnerships within BRICS and with countries like China, India, and Turkey provide some relief, but these efforts are limited by the complexities of navigating international sanctions and the relatively smaller scale of these trade networks. These constraints mean Russia cannot fully mitigate the long-term economic damage caused by its international isolation. The economic pressures on Russia have forced the government to expand its reliance on domestic debt issuance and other unconventional financial strategies to fund its war efforts. While this provides short-term liquidity, it significantly increases the risk of fiscal instability in the future. With interest payments on national debt growing, the government faces tough choices about balancing military expenditures with the needs of the civilian economy, further exacerbating long-term financial strain. In addition to internal challenges, Russia's shrinking access to global technology and innovation further limits its economic recovery. Sanctions have blocked imports of advanced machinery, software, and components critical for industrial modernization. This technological isolation hampers productivity and leaves industries, particularly in manufacturing and energy, lagging behind global standards. Over time, this gap could permanently reduce Russia's competitive position in global markets. Finally, The mounting costs of geopolitical isolation and economic instability are reshaping Russia's global standing. While the Kremlin has sought to cultivate alliances in the global south, these relationships often involve concessions and fail to replace the financial and technological support once provided by the W.S. As the war in Ukraine drags on, the economic burdens weigh heavily not only on the Russian state but also on its prospects for maintaining influence and economic viability on the world stage.
Thank you for watching, and don't forget to smash that subscribe, like, and notification bell for more global finance uncovered.